Having strong Pokemon by your side is super important, especially in a Hardcore Nuzlocke challenge, since any Pokemon that faints will have to be boxed forever, and losing any battle sends you all the way back to the start of the game. This is pretty concerning, since today I'm gonna try to beat HeartGold with the weakest type in the game. Seriously, a lot of these bugs are some of the weakest Pokemon ever committed to the Pokedex. You know things are bad when Caterpie is one of your best encounters. Evolving early makes it really good for the early game, but it falls off pretty quick, and it's basically just a sleep powder bot by the late game. Because this is HeartGold, we get Spinarak instead of Ladybot, and while this is slightly better, it's like saying having food poisoning is preferable to appendicitis. Neither is particularly awesome. Game Freak tried to save these bugs in later generations with some of the best status moves of all time, like Quiver Dance and Sticky Web, but here in Gen 4, bugs are pretty much an afterthought with no redeeming qualities. These two insects are the only ones we have to take on the first gym leader Faulkner and his dangerous birds. Now you might think that I've named my Butterfree Miss because she's a female, which first of all isn't very modern of you to assume, but also incorrect. Throughout this run, I've decided to name my Pokemon after various frustrating and annoying things that happen in my life, and because I spend what's likely considered an unhealthy amount for any grown adult playing Pokemon, one of the things that bugs me the most is missing moves. Ironically, Butterfree kinda has the perfect solution to this problem with her Compound Eyes ability boosting accuracy. This boosts the otherwise unreliable accuracy of Sleep Powder from 75% to 97.5%. Now personally, I have missed a 99% accurate wide lens boosted high jump kick in the past, which lost me my Halucha. So with my luck, I'm sure Butterfree will find a way to miss Sleep Powder anyway. Thankfully, she does connect versus Pidgeotto, which stays asleep long enough that I can finish it off with a few confusions. With our first gym badge collected, we're only actually able to catch one more bug before we face our arch nemesis Bugsy. Unfortunately, this is probably the bug that helps us the least versus Bugsy too, since Paris's grass type is weak to Scyther's U-turn. I name it headphones since getting your headphone cable caught on something like a knob or door handle is one of the most frustrating things of all time. I realize maybe I don't actually have the biggest problems, except for that one time I actually had appendicitis. Gym battle number 2 is a bug-on-bug brawl versus Bugsy, and it's gotta be said that if this thing had Aerial Ace or Wing Attack on its moveset, this run would be categorically impossible. Scyther outspeeds Butterfree by quite a bit, and obviously our other two team members, so we'd be subjected to a very swift sweep. Scyther still hits like a truck full of dynamite with a measly Quick Attack because of its Technician ability, after which Butterfree's able to put it to sleep and start hitting it with super effective gusts. A second gust activates Scyther's held Citrus Berry, which unfortunately heals it back up just out of range of being taken out by a third gust. This is actually extremely bad since it means Bugsy will heal up with a super potion, but a lucky critical hit gust from Butterfree bails us out of the situation and deals with Scyther for good. I expected this fight to be a lot more troublesome and to possibly lose one or two Pokemon here, but Butterfree just cleans up the rest of Bugsy's squad with a couple of gusts and we claim our second gym badge. Before we're able to leave Azalea Town, we've gotta fight our rival, and I didn't exactly make it easy for myself by picking Chikorita since that gives him Cyndaquil. I once again expected a lot more trouble than I got, since Butterfree just put everything to sleep and handled it with a few confusions. She even managed to do so while just barely staying under the level cap. Once we get access to Headbutt in the forest, I make sure to go back to Azalea to pick up the best encounter we can get throughout the entire game, which is Heracross. This thing has an insane attack stat of 125 and pretty decent speed to go with it, and all of it is because it's a fighting type. It doesn't learn a single bug move by level up except at level 55, and I'm not about to gamble with 85% accuracy. I of course name Heracross Subscribe since it bugs everyone when YouTubers interrupt the content just to tell you to subscribe, which I of course would never do. Heracross comes to us at the perfect time, just before we face the normal type gym leader Whitney, and very conveniently at level 19, Heracross learns the fighting type move Brick Break. By getting Heracross burned before the fight, I can increase its attack stat by 50% because of its Guts ability. This completely obliterates her lead Clefairy, but we're still not faster than Miltank. Being male, Heracross is unable to resist Miltank's power of seduction, but through sheer will and determination, he brick breaks through the spell, achieving the most efficient victory I've ever had against this evil cow, and also her Miltank. The new level cap of 25 allows us to evolve Spinarak into Ariados, which isn't much of an improvement. To make this thing viable, you probably have to strap rockets to it, give it a new Mega Evolution that sets up Sticky Web when it swaps in with a new ability that also has built-in Wonder Guard, and make it typeless, and that's probably not enough. I'm also able to evolve Headphones into Parasect at level 24, and skip past Route 35 in the national park for the time being to head to Route 36, where the only bug type I can find through headbutting is Pineco. I name her Tipping, since tipping culture has become extremely annoying, even in my home country of Sweden, where it used to be reserved for fancy dinners. But then everything changed when the iPads attacked. Once we reach Ecruteak, we can head east to pick up TM65, which is Shadowclaw. With this TM, we should have everything we need to take on the 4th gym leader Morty. As I head into this fight, I make a massive calculation error. Heracross is faster than Ghastly and both of Morty's Haunters, and I even accounted for the fact that he's slower than Gengar. With Heracross's decent special defense stat, I even made sure Heracross can survive a Shadow Ball from Gengar. And while this is true while Heracross is at full HP, Heracross is taking a bit of damage from burn at the end of every single turn. Now fortunately, Morty does not realize that this is the case and goes for Mean Look to trap me in instead of the 1 in 16 chance to hit me with a critical hit Shadow Ball. Ironically, I take him out with a Shadow Claw crit, which wasn't even remotely necessary. A theoretically scary fight, since losing Heracross essentially loses us the attempt on the spot. In reality, the risk wasn't very high, but I've faced far better odds and still lost. Our next gym fight is in Cianwood City, but here we can also pick up our next encounter. This kind gentleman lets us borrow his Shuckle. We don't actually get to nickname this thing, but Shuckle is annoying enough that it doesn't need a nickname. Gym Leader Chuck only has 2 Pokemon, and unfortunately for him, Heracross learns Aerial Ace by level up. This not only hits his fighting type Pokemon for super effective damage, but also bypasses the accuracy check, so we don't need to worry about Primeape setting up with Double Team. His Poliwrath can be super annoying, since it's incredibly tanky and can put your team to sleep with Hypnosis, which opens you up for powerful focus punches. We of course completely avoid this possibility by coming into the fight pre-burned, which means we can't be inflicted with a second status condition. Instead, Poliwrath just goes for a weak Surf, which we always survive even if it crits after the burn damage. I made sure to check this time. A second Aerial Ace knocks out Poliwrath, granting us our 5th gym badge, and I immediately head to Mahogany Town. Here we face the Ice-type gym leader Pryce, and Ice is the only type that has any possible claim to being even worse than Bug. Heracross being a fighting type, of course, completely embarrasses Pryce. Guts-boosted Stab Brick Break is too much for any of his Ice types to handle, and we outspeed each and every one of them. So far, this has been the most free matchup of the entire game, but we've got to be a little bit more prepared for Jasmine. Heracross is not able to one-shot Steelix with Brick Break, even with Guts. It's then at risk of being taken out by a critical hit Iron Tail, so we've got to come up with a less risky strategy. This preparation starts with us capturing a Venonat on Route 43 to dupe it out of the encounter pool in the national park. Ironically, Venonat is the most used Pokemon in VGC Regulation H out of our current roster, at a whopping meta-defining 0.04% usage. I name it dog shit since it's pretty annoying to step in. The name also pretty accurately describes its prowess in battle. Step 2 of the preparation is to evolve Pineco into Fortress. From there, we head back to the national park, where we've duped out all the encounters except for Pinsir or Scyther. Either of these would be an incredible addition to my pretty sorry looking team except for Heracross, and the Scyther I end up getting is probably the preferred of the 2 outcomes. Normally, the way you get a Metal Coat in this game is on the SS Aqua after the Pokemon League, but we can't afford to wait that long. Our only other option is to head west of Ecruteak City to hunt down Magnemites. Wild Magnemite only have a 5% chance to be holding a Metal Coat. This means this hunt could have taken a really long time, but I end up getting my Metal Coat after only 6 encounters. With it, we're able to evolve Scyther into Scizor, which is going to be incredibly helpful to take on Jasmine's Steelix. Jasmine leads off the 7th gym battle with a Magnemite that we can of course just pick off with a Brick Break. What I don't exactly understand is why she decides to send out her second Magnemite right after the first, when the first one did so poorly. The second one of course suffers the exact same fate and falls to a single Brick Break, which brings out Jasmine's Steelix. Just in range of the aforementioned critical hit Iron Tail, now that we've been taken down to 79 HP by burn, I swap out into Tipping. I start out great by misclicking and going for Rock Smash, which is the plan down the line. What I meant to do the first turn is go for Bug Bite to eliminate Steelix's Citrus Berry. Steelix just goes for a second Screech and even misses, so I take my chance and swap out into Scizor to get rid of those defense drops. Now you might be wondering why I named my Scizor Scooter. It's specifically referencing those electric scooters that you see everywhere around town. I have nightmares where someone looking at their phone runs me over, and even managed to catch this gentleman in 4K myself. He must have killer health insurance and the highest possible tier of Apple Pay. Anyway, to beat this Steelix as riskless as possible, I need to be patient and swap out every time it lowers my defense with Screech. Eventually, Steelix switches it up and goes for Sandstorm, giving me a window of opportunity to hit it with a Rock Smash. This way, I'm able to deal super effective damage and potentially get some defense drops along the way. After a Screech, which I keep switching around until Steelix doesn't go for Screech again, which takes quite a few turns. Eventually, Steelix loses our game of chicken and switches it up going for Irontail as I send in Scizor. This doesn't deal a ton of damage as I swap in, but ironically, it does drop Scizor's defense. It doesn't cut our defense in half like Screech though, so I decide to stay in and go for Rock Smash, just barely falling short of the KO as Steelix once again sets up the Sandstorm. Jasmine predictably heals up with a Hyper Potion, so I stay in and go for another Rock Smash, which further lowers Steelix's defense. This sadly doesn't lower it quite enough for me to take it out with another Rock Smash, leaving it in the red and once again lowering its defense. Jasmine uses her second Hyper Potion to heal all the way up to full, but at this point, Steelix's defense has been lowered enough that I do over half damage and am able to take it out with 2 Rock Smashes in a row. It took a bit of doing, but we safely managed to collect our 7th gym badge. Before we're able to advance towards Blackthorn City to take on the final gym leader Clair, we've gotta deal with Team Rocket once and for all. Most of these fights are basically free, since we can just give the choice specs to Butterfree and tear through the poison types like, well, butter. The one exception is Archer, who's got both a Houndour and Houndoom. Houndoom is naturally faster than everything we have and threatens to take us out with super effective stab Fire Fang unless we come up with a plan. Before Houndoom, we've got to take care of Houndour. This thing's speed is actually pretty close to Scizor, and I need to level up all the way to 39 to guarantee that I outspeed and knock it out with a Rock Smash. This in turn baits out Houndoom, setting our plan into motion, and in hindsight, this plan is very overcooked. What I end up doing is kind of what I should have done with extra steps. I've given Scizor an Occa Berry to guarantee that we survive a Fire Fang, however, this still leaves us vulnerable to a crit. After the berry allows us to survive, I can go for a slow U-turn, swapping out into Heracross. With a held Choice Scarf, Heracross outspeeds and can take care of Houndoom's remaining health, but I realize I could have just led with Heracross and knocked out both Houndour and Houndoom in a row without needing to use the Occa Berry strategy. Leading with Heracross still baits in Houndoom after I take care of Houndour, but I guess Coughing being in the second slot in team order tripped me up. Either way, we defeat the Firehounds without losing a Pokemon, and I send back in Scizor to put the nail in the coffin. Archer is the final member of Team Rocket, so we can put all our focus into getting to Blackthorn City. Before I do though, I make a quick pit stop at Route 35 that we skipped earlier. I didn't exactly skip this route for any optimizing reason, it's just that Yanma is a 1% encounter, and it took me 45 minutes to find this thing. I also kind of forget why I named it Loud. I guess loud noises are annoying. The final gym leader Clair is definitely the most challenging, with both a Gyarados and Kingdra on our team. I lead with tipping for 2 main reasons. Number 1 is to eat the Intimidate so that it doesn't lower Scizor's attack. Reason number 2 is to set up 3 layers of spikes. The worst thing this Gyarados can do to me is Dragon Rage, which always does 40 HP of damage. Now with 118 at max HP, we are 3 hit points from being able to survive 3 hits. To get around this, I make sure to give Fortress a Citrus Berry to get us back above half HP after the second Dragon Rage. This allows us to survive the third with 27 HP remaining and set up the 3rd layer of spikes. Having left a few tips for Clair's Pokemon in the back, Fortress's job is done and I swap Scizor into a Dragon Rage. To put myself in the best possible position, I make sure to go for a Roost after a second Dragon Rage to almost get me all the way back up to full HP. By doing this a second turn, I actually managed to get Scooter all the way back up to full, and even though Gyarados is faster, so I lose 40 HP, it's a lot better than leaving Scizor deep in the yellow. Now for my special trick, I've given Scizor a Wakan Berry to hold, which changes Natural Gift's type to Electric and gives it a base power of 70, which easily knocks out Gyarados even without the critical hit. This is why we didn't want to be intimidated, since that wouldn't be a one-hit knockout, and from here, we want to swap in Heracross, but we can't just send it in immediately. This is because one of Clair's Dragonairs has Fire Blast, which we could technically survive, but we wouldn't have enough health to survive burn damage afterwards. I wasn't sure what move Dragonair was going to go for next, and if it goes for a second Fire Blast, I really don't want to risk sending in Heracross. Unfortunately, I do get fully paralyzed as it goes for Thunder Wave, since encoring it into a status move would have been perfect. Instead, I settle for locking it into Dragon Pulse, which isn't as lethal as Fire Blast. We can now safely swap in Subscribe, who of course, as if the universe is trying to prove a point to me, immediately gets critical hit by a Dragon Pulse. It does a ton of damage, and after burn, I'm not left with a lot in the tank. I go for a close combat, which easily knocks out Dragonair even if it would have been at full HP. Burn deals exactly 15 damage to me at the end of the turn, so I should be able to survive one more turn. With a held Choice Scarf, Heracross is able to outspeed Kingdra, and because of the 3 layers of spikes we set up previously, we're just barely able to knock it out with a close combat. Once defeated, we take the 15 damage of burn at the end of the turn, leaving us with just 4 HP as Clair sends out her final Pokemon Dragonair. Now, it may look like we can't stay in here because of burn, but you don't actually take damage at the end of a battle. So by knocking out Dragonair in one hit with a close combat, we collect our final gym badge very much at the edge of Death's embrace. With no further bugs able to be caught, we've got to prepare ourselves for the Elite Four challenge, and it's honestly not super difficult to decide who to bring. Butterfree's Psybeam could be insanely useful for both Koga and Bruno, but she's of course mostly here for her super accurate sleep powder. Tipping has the unique ability to set up spikes, and is one of our two only Pokemon to resist Dragonite's Outrage. Shucky's mostly here so that half of our team only takes neutral damage from flying. It's also our only neutral matchup into fire, which definitely can't be said about Scizor, but it's one of the best bug types of all time, so it's a no-brainer pick. Yanmega is by far our fastest Pokemon, especially with Speed Boost, and gives us some unique coverage with Shadow Ball and Ancient Power. Finally, we of course have to bring the star of the show, Heracross, who I've made sure to pre-burn before entering the Elite Four, since there's no way to get statused once we enter. My initial plan to take on Will was to use Heracross, but a Guts and Expert Belt boosted Shadow Claw isn't enough to take out Slowbro even with a critical hit. Instead, I needed to approach this problem from the special side, which is why I settled on using Yanmega, since it's the only one of my Pokemon that gets Shadow Ball. With the Johto Elite Four level cap matching Karen's Pokemon at 47, we have no problem outspeeding Will's Pokemon since we're much higher level. Not having to worry about outspeeding, which I wouldn't have had to worry about even at the same level because of Speed Boost, I can focus my item on dealing as much damage as possible, which is where the choice specs come in. This item that we can pick up at the Lake of Rage effectively puts us at +1 special attack immediately. The theoretical downside is that we have to commit to a single move and don't get to switch things up, but we only need to use Shadow Ball anyway since all of Will's Pokemon are weak to Ghost. Slowbro doesn't have nearly as much special defense as physical, leading to a swift victory. Our matchup versus Koga isn't nearly as free since he specializes in poison types and degenerate evasion strategies. We can at least get rid of his lead Ariados immediately with a super effective Aerial Ace. If this thing actually had Sticky Web and a Focus Sash, I'd be a little bit more concerned. Koga's Crobat comes out next, threatening with a quad effective Wing Attack, so I swap out into Scooter. Crobat doesn't really get any great flying types in this generation, something like Acrobatics would have been devastating. But in this game, what makes Crobat so annoying to deal with is the fact that it sets up its evasion with Double Team. Even so, I do still manage to connect with an Ice-type natural gift for super effective damage, which unfortunately because of Crobat's bulk doesn't quite get the KO, and ends up activating Crobat's Citrus Berry, which just barely takes it out of range of a Bullet Punch. Annoyingly, after we get hit by a Wing Attack, this of course puts Crobat in range of being healed up all the way to full, which essentially means I wasted my item slot and natural gift, so I just heal up with a Roost to get back to full HP myself. I actually managed to connect with another Bullet Punch before Crobat continues setting up its evasion, which means I of course missed the next one. Crobat isn't dealing a ton of damage with Wing Attacks, so we still have a lot of time left to try and connect with these punches. Once it takes me below half, I make sure to heal up with Roost to reset the amount of turns until it takes me out with Wing Attack. With my luck, I of course end up doing quite a bit of missing, so it takes a few turns of roosting before I'm able to knock Crobat out. Fortress comes out third, and I decide to be what might be considered slightly overly cautious since this thing has Explosion, and I really don't want to swap something in and lose one of my essential Pokemon to something as silly as an exploding Fortress. So instead, I U-turn out into Shuckle, who can Encore Fortress into Swift, making it safe to send in Yanmega. It only takes a couple of Shadow Balls to take out Fortress, which I can comfortably go for without the fear of Explosion. Fourth out is Venomoth, and because I want to set myself up as efficiently as possible to take out the final Pokemon Muck, I swap out into Scizor and go for a Bullet Punch U-turn combo, which manages to both take out Venomoth and swap to Heracross just before Muck comes out. This way, all I gotta do is click a Guts boosted Earthquake to drop the Slime Ball and defeat the second member of the Elite Four. The third member of the Elite Four is Bruno, who is pretty dangerous since Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee both have Fire-type moves, and both Onix and Machamp have Rock-type moves. Preferably, we want to find a way to play this fight without taking those hits, since our Pokemon are super weak to Fire and Rock. Step 1 is to set up 3 layers of spikes with Tipping, and anytime Hitmontop goes for Dig, I can just protect every other turn to never take any damage. Bruno realizes this after a single Dig, but instead of going for Triple Kick, he just starts spamming Counter, which of course won't work as long as I'm setting up spikes. After setting up my 3 layers of spikes, I end up setting up 2 layers of Toxic Spikes as well, even though this isn't strictly necessary, but it will help with a little bit of chip damage versus Onix. After I set up all my spikes, I don't have a great way to deal damage to Hitmontop with Fortress, especially as long as it's spamming Counter, so I swap out into Miss. From here, we just need to get rid of Hitmontop, so I put it to sleep and take it out with a few Psybeams. Defeating Hitmontop with Butterfree means Onix comes out next since it's got a quad effective move in Rock Slide. This is way preferable to taking on one of the Hitmons, who would be a disaster to switch into. To switch in Heracross, I first pivot to Scizor to take the incoming Rock Slide, which also deals a little bit of extra chip damage to Onix because of the poison. This will cause Onix to either go for a resisted Earthquake into Heracross or just set up Sandstorm, either of which is preferable to Rock Slide. From here, we lock into Choice Scarf Close Combat, which easily knocks out Onix's remaining health. The reason we have to be Scarfed is specifically because of Hitmonlee, since it outspeeds by just a little, even at level 42. Fourth out is Hitmonchan, which is way slower, so it's nothing to worry about, and we drop it with yet another Close Combat. Finally, there's Bruno's Machamp, and Guts boosted Close Combat isn't quite enough to take it out from full HP, which is why we had to set up those spikes in the first place, just like versus Clair's Kingdra. And with that flawless victory executed, we only have one member of the Elite Four left before we can take on the champion. The obvious main threat on Karen's team is of course her favorite Pokemon, Houndoom. However, since my fight versus Executive Archer, I've learned from my mistakes. Taking out Umbreon with any of my Pokemon except for Shuckle will instantly bait out Houndoom. This is a slight modification of the truth since Heracross is quad weak to flying, which does bait in Murkrow, but it just falls to a super effective Close Combat and then baits out Houndoom, so it's effectively the same result. By holding a Choice Scarf, our Beetle can outrun the Doomdoggo and just knock it out with a single super effective Close Combat, meaning we don't have to worry about its flamethrowers whatsoever. Obviously, we've got to immediately switch out once she sends in Gengar, since Close Combat is unable to hit Ghost types. I honestly never understood why this Gengar has Lick instead of Shadow Ball, since Morty's Gengar has it, and he's the 4th gym leader, not the 4th member of the Elite Four. This does mean Gengar's only notable attacking move is Focus Blast, which we can easily quad resist with a Bug Flying type. If Yanmega had choice specs, I could take out Gengar in one hit, but just in case it went for Destiny Bond on the Switch and I can't just immediately knock it out, I instead go for an Ancient Power first to deal a bit of chip damage and scout out if it goes for Destiny Bond before I get a speed boost to outspeed and knock it out with a Shadow Ball. Karen's final Pokemon is Vileplume, which I can't just one-shot with an Air Slash since Loud learns it at level 54. Instead, I just stay in and go for as much damage as I can with Shadow Ball and get Yanmega paralyzed before swapping out into Miss. This way, Butterfree never gets paralyzed on the Switch, and I can save her Lumberry in case Vileplume goes for Stun Spore to get a free attacking turn. I never actually end up needing to use my Lumberry since I just put Vileplume to sleep and managed to take it out with a couple of Psybeams for the win. So far, our bug types have handled the Elite Four without any hiccups, but that's all about to change since Lance is a Dragon type champion in name only. His true allegiance lies with the Flying type, which is about as bad as things could possibly be. Going into this champion fight versus Lance, there's a good chance we lose most of our team or just all of it entirely. First, we have to deal with his Gyarados, so I lead with Miss to eat the Intimidate before swapping out into Scizor. Getting frozen by Ice Fang on the Switch here is just a 10% chance to lose the run, so I definitely should have tried to put Gyarados to sleep since there's only a 2.5% chance to miss, which is way lower than 10. Putting Gyarados to sleep would also mean I wouldn't have to worry about potentially getting flinched by Waterfall before I get off my Electric type Natural Gift to take it out in one hit. Thankfully, I don't end up getting punished by any of the hacks, but I definitely should have prepared better for this lead. Charizard is second, which is a massive issue with both Fire Fang and Air Slash. The only Pokemon I have that takes neutral damage from both is Shuckle, but he still takes a ton of damage from Air Slash. Shuckle's pathetic base attack stat of 10 doesn't let me deal a ton of damage to Charizard with Rock Tomb despite it being quad effective. But damage isn't the point here, we just want to lower Charizard's speed. I stay in to try and get a second speed drop, which ends up going about as terribly as you can imagine, with both a critical hit and Shucky flinching. One speed drop is still enough to execute plan B, so I swap out into Miss, who's holding the only focus sash we can get throughout the entire game. And sure, this allows us to survive with 1 HP, but it means we also can't swap in Butterfree again for the rest of the fight. Unfortunately, our next part of the plan is a bit of a gamble. All we need is for Charizard to not get a first turn wake up as we swap out into Yanmega. No, why is it always like this? How is my luck always like this? Okay, because Butterfree was at 1 HP, Charizard uses a random move. If that was Air Slash, we would have just instantly lost the run on the spot, so maybe my luck's turning around. Okay, I definitely think that counts as my luck fully turning around. We'd already be faster than the incoming Aerodactyl because of the speed boost at the end of the turn, but with the Omni boost and choice specs, we've got enough firepower to knock out Aerodactyl with a super effective Ancient Power. In fact, specs and a special attack boost gives us enough power to take out Dragonite. Okay, as crazy as getting the second Ancient Power boost in a row is, it's actually not even necessary. Theoretically, this fight is already won. We knock each Dragonite out with 1 Ancient Power each, except I only have 1 PP for Ancient Power left. So I'm able to get a free KO on the first Dragonite, but that means we still have to deal with the other 2. It's certainly a much better outcome than struggling to defeat all 3, but I thought I had this fight in the bag. Yanmega is at least able to pull off one final trick, since I learned U-turn level 49, and by getting rid of Ancient Power, Choice Specs doesn't have me locked in anymore. This way, Yanmega is able to get some chip damage with U-turn at +2 attack before I swap in Tipping, who gets paralyzed by a Thunder Wave. This must be the Blizzard level 49 Dragonite, meaning its most effective move against Fortress is Hyper Beam, giving me 2 potential turns to attack. Fortress, of course, spends both of those turns fully paralyzed, and even a 3rd turn in a row after I'm struck by another Hyper Beam. Realizing I'll only be able to take 1 more Hyper Beam before Tipping goes down, I opt for the nuclear option. The Deathless Dream does blow up with Fortress, but at least this way we only need to deal with 1 last Dragonite. The sacrifice also gives us a free way to swap back into Mist to put Dragonite to sleep. From here, we are fresh out of options. It's time to just throw anything and everything we can at this thing to deal as much damage as possible. First, I switch to Shuckle, who's got 2 main objectives. As long as Dragonite stays asleep, step number 1 is to go for Bug Bite to eliminate its Citrus Berry. This has the added bonus of getting us back above half health. Dragonite wakes up, but just sets up Safeguard, giving us 1 free turn to drop its speed with Rock Tomb. The health we got back from the Citrus Berry gives us just enough HP to survive Dragonite's Outrage, so I'm able to drop its speed further with a 2nd Rock Tomb, meaning Scissor's gonna be able to outspeed it as well. Unfortunately, this is the end of the road for Shucky, and it's gonna be a little bit awkward to return him to his trainer in this state. The one good thing to come out of Shucky's demise is that Dragonite gets confused after only 2 turns of Outrage. It also gives me another free switch back to Butterfree so I can put Dragonite to sleep. From here, I'm just going to try and get as much damage as possible with Psybeam, which unfortunately is not very much. What I'm hoping is going to happen is that Dragonite hits itself in confusion as it wakes up, and I'm able to put it back to sleep again. If you can't tell, I'm coping pretty hard at this stage. Because Dragonite locks itself into Outrage, I can safely swap in Scizor despite the fact that Dragonite has Fire Blast. I Roost Up, which gets Scooter to full HP, and Dragonite snaps out of confusion, hitting me with a 2nd Outrage. What I was hoping for is Dragonite getting a 3-turn Outrage, but unfortunately it gets confused again, which means it is able to click Fire Blast. I could stay in and hope that it hurts itself in confusion, or that it misses Fire Blast, but knowing my luck, that's never gonna happen. If it's not clear, despite my luck with Ancient Power getting 2 boosts, I'm at the mercy of RNG. I switch to Heracross since I know it's able to survive 1 Fire Blast, but after burn damage, I'm left at just 8 HP, which means I can't take another turn of burn, so even if Dragonite wouldn't have hit me and I took the Fire Blast this turn, I would have still been taken out by burn, so it was never a plausible switch in since I don't have any moves that could take Dragonite out. I switch back to Scizor, hoping just maybe Dragonite misses, and by the grace of Arceus, it hurts itself in confusion. Come on, Technician Boosted Bullet Punch, you can do it! Come on, yes! If Dragonite doesn't hit itself there, not only does Scizor go down to a Fire Blast, but the entire team is doomed since Lance will instantly full restore the next turn. We may have lost half the team, but we made it to the Hall of Fame, and unfortunately for the team, that's not quite the end of the game. As we arrive to the Kanto region, there are unfortunately no new bugs for us to add to the team. We did still have 3 Pokemon in the box, so we do have a full team of 6 to take on the Kanto gym leaders. All of the Kanto gym leaders except for Blue are pretty much a joke, but I still make sure to take on Erica first since she rewards us with the TM for Giga Drain. We're able to teach this move to Yanmega, who can easily sweep Brock since all of his Pokemon are quad weak to grass.
Why'd you have to show up and bug us now?
I see what you did there, bug us. That was a good one.
Do you know what they call people like
Whoa,
you?
People like, what do you mean people like me? You're almost starting to sound a little
You heard me right, pet.
Okay, I knew Misty didn't like bugs, but she didn't have to go and drop the P word with a hard T twice. Luckily, the combination of Yanmega and Scizor makes the bigot extremely easy to beat. Next, I head back to Vermilion City to take on Lieutenant Surge, who I can simply beat by giving Heracross a Choice Scarf to outspeed all of his fast electric types and take each and every one of them out with a Guts-boosted Earthquake. Similarly, I can outspeed all of Sabrina's Pokemon with a Choice Scarf and knock all 3 of them out with a Shadow Claw each. Heracross's final sweep is versus Blaine, where just like versus Surge, charge, we can just spam Guts boosted Earthquakes to knock out all of his Pokemon before he can make a single move. After picking up the TM for Psychic from Mr. Psychic in Saffron City, we can simply spam Specs boosted Psychics to easily defeat Janine. And while the first 7 gym leaders of Kanto basically weren't any more difficult than random trainers in the overworld, the last one more than makes up for it in difficulty. Blue's team is an absolute disaster for a bug catcher like myself. The guy has 4 Pokemon with moves that hit bugs super effectively, and really the only Pokemon he has where we've got a decent matchup is his lead Executor, which we can hit quad effectively with bug type moves. Executor is extremely slow, so we can easily knock it out before it gets to do anything, which brings out Arcanine. The reason Eviolite Venonat is used more than Venomoth in VGC is because Venomoth loses Compound Eyes when it evolves. Thankfully, I still managed to connect with my Sleep Powder. From here, I just need to get as much damage as I can, so I go for a Psychic, which does about a fourth of Arcanine's health. I even managed to get in with a second Psychic as the good boy continues to snooze. If Arcanine wakes up, Venomoth is holding an Occa Berry to reduce the power of its Flare Blitz one time, which will cause us to survive as long as Arcanine doesn't get a critical hit. Unfortunately, our third Psychic does put Arcanine in range of being healed up with a full restore, but Venomoth makes up for this by instantly getting a critical hit Psychic to get Arcanine right back down to where it was. Amazingly, this means Venomoth can pick up a second KO without losing a single hit point. Once Rhydon comes out, I wish I had a second Giga Drain TM that I could teach to Venomoth, but instead, I've gotta risk it again with a Sleep Powder before swapping out into Scizor, who takes care of Rhydon with a couple of Iron Heads as it continues to snooze. Machamp is one of the biggest problems on Blue's team since it can't ever miss because of No Guard. Ariados does quad resist Dynamic Punch, but because I get confused 100% of the time, I'm not able to stay in and go for something like Protect to try and stall it out of Stone Edge. Instead, I've got to switch back out into Scizor, who doesn't take too much damage, but if it gets too many crits, this could be trouble. Realizing that Scizor is faster, I might as well get as much chip damage as I can with U-Turn as I switch back into Ariados to take the next Dynamic Punch. I then swap back to Scizor again, tanking another Stone Edge, which ends up activating my Citrus Berry. I then get a crit with U-Turn, which doesn't do enough to take Machamp out, but does conveniently leave it in the red, which will cause Blue to heal the following turn. There's still a Dynamic Punch coming my way this turn, so I've first got to swap in Ariados to take care of it. With Blue wasting a turn on healing, I get the tempo swing that I need to freely swap into Yanmega. My bespectacled Dragonfly can then outspeed and take out Machamp with an Air Slash without fear of missing because of No Guard. Second to last is Gyarados, which can't even take me out with a crit, so I might as well stay in and do as much damage as I can with Air Slash. If it for some obnoxious reason manages to get the freeze with Ice Fang, I guess I just have to switch out. But failing to get the freeze, Yanmega just picks up the chain KO. Finally, Blue's just left with his ace, Pidgeot, and here I decide to make a strategic sacrifice. I swap in Venomoth, fully expecting it to just go down to an Air Slash, but I actually managed to survive in the yellow, which not only gives Venomoth the chance to put Pidgeot to sleep, but also to switch out and survive. The bird unfortunately immediately wakes up and hits Scizor with a resisted return, so I decide to risk one crit Air Slash to try and keep the entire team alive. With a slow U-turn, I deal a bit of chip to Pidgeot and swap out into Heracross at the end of the turn. From there, a Scarf Close Combat picks up the KO, which means we've got a full team of 6 going into the final fight of the game. To make sure the lives we lost to Lance weren't in vain, we've got to take our team to the top of Mount Silver. Here, we've got to take on the final boss of the game, Red, and we've actually got a much better matchup here than versus Blue, since he doesn't have a ton of Pokemon with super effective moves against bugs. I lead with Heracross, who can outspeed and take out Pikachu with an Earthquake even without a Scarf, since Pikachu doesn't get a speed boost from Light Ball, only a boost to its attack and special attack. This immediately brings out the big bad Charizard, which is by far the most dangerous thing Red has. Ariados did get a brief time to shine versus Machamp, but now it's time for him to do something even more useful. It's unfortunately going to be the very last thing he does, but it does give us a free switch into Yanmega. A Specs boosted quad effective Ancient Power takes out the Flying Lizard, and unfortunately this time, we don't get the Omni boost. Lapras comes out next, and I could stay in and go for super effective Ancient Powers, but it's not going to deal that much damage, and I definitely need Yanmega to take down Venusaur. Instead, I decide to swap Scizor into the Blizzard, which doesn't deal that much damage, and I can fight back with Iron Head, which doesn't quite take Lapras into the yellow. yellow. Brine is a little bit scary here, since if we get below half health, it's gonna double in power. We avoid getting chipped over the edge by hail by holding the leftovers item to gain back the same amount of HP to keep us in the green. A second Iron Head takes Lapras low, which will cause Red to go for a full restore, so I take the following turn to go for a Roost to get me back up above half HP so that we won't take double damage from Brine. A few more Iron Heads take care of Lapras, which brings out Blastoise. I'm so close to full HP that I figure I can take anything this thing throws at me, but of course Red just misses Focus Miss. This effectively gives me a free slow U-turn into Heracross, who can take care of Blastoise with a close combat the following turn. With 2 Pokemon left, Red for some reason decides to send in Snorlax instead of Venusaur. This is a vexing choice, since Snorlax of course immediately gets knocked out by a stab super effective, guts boosted close combat. This little blunder leaves Red with one last Pokemon, Venusaur, so expecting a Sludge Bomb, I safely swap in Scizor, and who knew that it wouldn't be me missing Sleep Powder during this run, but actually Red. This huge miss gives me another free slow U-turn to swap out into Yanmega, who with one final stab super effective specs boosted Air Slash not only finishes off Venusaur, but also finishes the run. And that's how I, through the both terrible and amazing luck, somehow managed to beat a Pokemon HeartGold Hardcore Nuzlocke using only bug types. Or rather more accurately, mostly with Guts Heracross. But hey, let me know what challenge I should try next time down in the comments below, and until we see each other then...